Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 7th Annual GI Cancer Patient Summit. I am joined by my very good friend and colleague in this space, Mary Mccusker, who oversees and runs the amazing organization, Hope Connections, that's been a longtime partner of the Ruesch Center. And we are so excited to bring you yet again our high-level, very important content for our GI cancer patients out there. And so the purpose of our meeting is to really go over disease-specific information and education for our patients and families, and really give you some new tools and new language so that you can have a better experience as a cancer patient, if you will, and caregiver and family. So I am so excited to introduce to you all, I know her very well, Mary Mccusker, who is the president and CEO of Hope Connections for Cancer Support. Mary, good morning, welcome.
Good morning, John. I think that we were hopeful that we were going to be back in person this year, but I'm going to look at the silver lining of this. And I think sometimes it's hard to look at the silver lining of COVID. And other than being able to wear my yoga pants to work almost every day, it is the fact that we can reach a wider audience. And I'm excited that even when we are back in next year, in person, fingers crossed, that we will have the ability to have a hybrid version so we can still have our friends that are joining us coast to coast this morning.
And Mary and Hope Connections are about to open soon, we hope, your brand new building for everybody. And just an incredible new space that if you haven't had a chance to go out and see it, what's our timeline on being open and ready to go?
We are looking at September for our open house and to be able to start up programs again. So again, another fingers crossed. So
it's amazing that you're able to do what you've done through all of that time. So we have a full morning ahead for you all. We are going to give you a brief overview of where we are within each of our groups. And then we will turn it over to Dr. Weinberg and Dr. Braun, as you see there. Then I will be back with Dr. Brown to talk about GI cancer research, the management tools, and supporting the caregiver. And so you have all of this great content, we hope efficiently and interestingly delivered for you. The first of these breakouts is Miles Braun and Dr. Ben Weinberg, both of whom are outstanding clinicians. It's really to focus on this increasingly important aspects of integrative medicine in cancer care. And I know you'll want to listen in on that and get perspective on that. And I know, Mary, you guys really fill this void for many of our patients with mind, body, and yoga type programming, right?
Absolutely. For the folks that don't know about Hope Connections, we know that there's so much more to a cancer diagnosis. We have the docs like Dr. Marshall and all of his colleagues that help with that medical side. But for the physical and emotional side, that's where Hope Connections comes in. We offer cancer-specific support groups, as well as a GI cancer support group that is the fourth Thursday of every month. And we have an array of mind-body programs, so everything from yoga to Pilates, to mind-body boxing, meditation, you name it, and also educational programs. And back to that silver lining again of COVID, that we have been able to get amazing speakers from all over the country. And our program director, Stephanie Stern, does a great job with that, getting the best speakers in the area.
Mind body boxing. I gotta do that. I don't know what even that is, but I'm going to try that. Let me finish up with the agenda here real quick. Is that I'm then joined by Dr. Alicia Brown, who is not only a patient but a researcher in this space, and she and I will discuss where we are with new therapies. And then Lee Jones and Dr. Marcus Noel are going to talk about GI cancer management tools for patients, families, and caregivers to improve the interface, if you will, with your healthcare team. And then finally, Martha Raymond and Jasmine Greenamyer will come and give you a discussion about taking care of that caregiver. As a former caregiver myself, I can't tell you how important it is to have that kind of support. I do want to give a particular shout out to those who are helping to support us with AbbVie, Taiho, Natera, and Bayer, helping to support our programming. for this annual event. And just for those of you who are more familiar with Hope Connections, maybe, and not so much with the Ruesch Center, we were founded back in 2009 with an idea of taking our increasing knowledge in the molecular medicine and translational research space and bringing that patient-centered philosophy to really improve outcomes for all patients with GI cancers. And our major areas of focus are research, cutting-edge research, delivering cures, to engage, connect, empower our GI cancer patients and their caregivers, and to educate and support our medical and patient communities. And as you see, we have colleagues around the world all rowing in the same direction to try and improve outcomes for GI cancers, because we know we can't do it just by ourselves. Mary, give us another little overview of where you are with Hope Connections.
Absolutely. I got excited to share about all the work that we are doing at Hope Connections. So all of our groups are professionally facilitated by licensed professionals and instructors. And very importantly, all of our services are offered free of charge to the patient, because we know all of the other things that go into a cancer diagnosis financially, and we did not want to add to that burden. So we fundraise all year long so that we are able to offer these services free of charge. And not just to the patient, to the caregiver. Dr. Marshall mentioned that he was a caregiver. I have been a former caregiver as well. And sometimes that's the person that can be forgotten. So if you're a caregiver out there today, please look into our caregiver support groups. We have weekly, one in the evening, one at lunchtime, to try and accommodate schedules. And again, all of our mind body programs are offered to the caregiver as well. And you check us out online. Just because you have a chat with us does not mean to say that we're locking you into a 5-year contract. You know, if it's a good fit, it might not be a great fit right now. It might be a good fit 6 months down the road. But it's just important to know that that resource is out there and available.
That's great. And we're so proud that you also have a dedicated group for our GI cancer patients and support group. And you see there, it meets Thursdays at 6:30, so fourth Thursday of the month. So we suspect many of you will be interested and involved in that. And so we want you to be in touch with us. Here's all of our social media. We welcome live tweets, whatever the heck that is. And hope you will enjoy this morning of content. Tag us on your social media, tell other friends about it. And after this is done, all of this content will also be available online to watch at a later date. So with that, we will kick off the morning.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us at the GI Patient Summit. I'm Dr. Benjamin Weinberg, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Miles Braun. Dr. Braun directs an educational initiative at Georgetown Lombardi Comprehensive Cancer Center to bring integrative approaches to optimize the health and quality of life of adolescent and young adult cancer patients, survivors, and caregivers. The two of us collaborate closely on a pilot program focused on our early onset GI cancer patients. Today, we'd like to talk about what integrative medicine means and how these treatments can enhance the standard of care. Dr. Braun, again, thank you for joining me. Can you briefly define what integrative care means to you?
Well, first, thanks to the GI Summit for inviting me, and thanks to Dr. Marshall and you for collaborating with our integrative initiative. Integrative care is a collaborative effort with the patient or the survivor, and the patient has control over this, and we try to meet the patient where they are. And this is an evidence-informed field. We try to base what we do on good quality studies, and leading professional organizations such as ASCO, the American Society for Clinical Oncology, are beginning to endorse the practices that I'm going to talk about today and to recommend them. This is not alternative medicine, so it's not in opposition or instead of the conventional or standard care, but it's really a collaborative relationship working together with the physicians and the oncologists who are primarily responsible for treating the patients. The other part of what we're doing is it's not treating cancer itself. What we're trying to do is to improve wellness and reduce suffering that's associated with cancer and its treatment. So we don't claim to be able to cure cancer, but we do try to help with pain, nausea, peripheral neuropathy, people being worried or sad, having low energy, not sleeping well, being stressed, and all of these are common occurrences. So you can look at integrative medicine as having several components. One is lifestyle medicine, the things that we do that we have control over. It could be sleep, could be exercise, it could be diet. It's the social interactions we have, reducing stress. And we bring in mind-body medicine, and I'll talk more about that in a little while, I think, as we get into the interview. And sometimes traditional medical practices, things like acupuncture is an example of that.
Yeah, and for those of us at Georgetown, we kind of work in this pursuit of cura personalis, which is the cure for the whole person. And as a medical oncologist, I am often very focused on the cancer, where it is, how we're treating it, what's not working now, what do we do next, what do we do after that. And it's very easy to kind of lose kind of grounding in sight of the whole person, right? And you alluded to a lot of stressors that are not even directly effects of the cancer itself, but all these indirect effects on lifestyle and anxiety and a whole host of issues, and that our young onset population is especially attuned to. So when you're trying to design and build an integrative medicine program on top of our sort of pre-existing oncology clinical program, what are the components that you're looking at? What type of services do you offer?
Well, what we have and started in the adolescent and young adult program is massage, and this is therapeutic massage, and it's performed by licensed massage practitioners who are trained in oncology care, and they work for a nonprofit that's called Heal Well, and we've had them about 20 months working in our pediatric clinic with patients age 15 to 39, and it's been extremely well received. So that's one of the modalities, and the patients are served, their caregivers, because as we know, it's such a difficult situation for caregivers of patients, and they have their own stresses and challenges. So the massage is open to them, and even staff of MedStar Georgetown University Hospital, if there aren't patients at that moment or caregivers, the staff enjoy getting a massage. We have acupuncture, and that's again a licensed acupuncturist that is at our hospital, and she's came from Mayo Clinic several years ago, and that's been very well received also. We get very good feedback from the patients about these services. And then I provide some educational components to interested patients, and that could be around things like dietary supplements or mind-body practices, things like yoga, tai chi, breathing exercises, stress management. I'm always promoting exercise. There's a nice promotional material from the Mayo Clinic that says exercise is a secret weapon in cancer care. And the idea is just to keep people moving so they don't lose muscle strength, so they don't have clotting in certain parts of their body that might happen when they're not active. And it also increases mood. It helps mood when we move. So that's another piece of it, and sometimes help people with strategies for sleeping better. So those are some of the things that I do. And I should mention too, the clinicians, the oncologists will ask me sometimes for information about dietary supplements that patients are taking. And that's a whole area that is really actually complicated. And I would say to anybody listening to this, be very careful about dietary supplements that you take, especially if you're in treatment, and to check with your physician. But our oncologists will ask me sometimes to go into more depth I should mention here that part of the reason that Dr. Turetsky, who's the head of the AYA program, and he's based in the pediatric side, he opened the door to my starting this program 4 years ago, was because I served at the FDA for 14 years, for 8 of them as a division director, and I was responsible for post-marketing, so monitoring of safety of products that are already on the market, particularly vaccines. And sometimes also we were involved in the approval process, and also did research in these areas ourselves. So it allows me to critically assess the medical literature as it relates to supplements. There are also any of these integrative modalities that I've been talking about, because there are studies evaluating them. And when you get into the details, it really helps to have a background in reading and writing the medical literature. So that's some of the ways that we provide services in this area.
Yeah, I would, highly second what you said in terms of please run whatever supplements, over-the-counter herbs, things that you're taking to your oncologist, because there could be potential interactions with the treatment we're offering. We'd hate to have our things like chemotherapy, targeted therapies rendered less effective for sometimes lack of benefit of certain supplements. And then the other thing you said regarding exercise, I believe ASCO just came out with their first real recommendations in terms of exercise and things of that nature. We do know for folks who are colorectal cancer survivors that exercise far and away is the sort of main mechanism to decrease risk of recurrence and future disease. So I highly, again, even for folks on active treatment, but especially after treatment, we know exercise is very important. I know we had a study with one of our former fellows now and attending, Dr. Samantha Armstrong, who's at Indiana, on acupressure. So you mentioned a little bit about acupuncture, but she was actually able to demonstrate in a small study of GI cancer patients where acupressure, where you're taught certain pressure points and how to self-administer this, which is obviously easier than something like acupuncture, which I imagine would be harder to self-administer. That they were able to improve things such as nausea, fatigue, and is that something that you all do as well?
Yes, and we just before I got on this meeting that we're having right now, one of our oncologists sent out a referral for acupuncture for an inpatient who's actually an adult who has neutropenia, so very low white blood cell count. And so for that reason is not eligible for acupuncture for having the needles. And we also sometimes have patients who have low platelet counts, so their clotting is not ideal. And so for those patients, as well as patients who don't like needles, those are the really 3 reasons why they will get acupressure. And it's very well received. And so our acupuncturist does teach the patients how to do that, and also their caregivers, because sometimes there are hard to reach spots that would be helped by acupressure. And so we do that, and it gives the patient a sense of control to be able to apply acupressure themselves, and they don't have to, if it's 3 in the morning and they're having an issue that they'd like some relief, they're not going to be coming in for an acupuncture treatment. So it's a wonderful kind of empowering and control giving thing to have acupressure. And also, so our massage therapists will even tell patients some things that they can do, and this is bordering on acupressure, that the patients can do for themselves, or again, the caregivers can provide it.
And you had mentioned, a number of symptoms and that, acupressure and massage may help with. What specifically, aside from kind of just feeling better on a global level, do you expect or talk to patients about what benefits they may derive from those specific treatments?
Well, with the massage, people feel better while they're getting the massage. It's calming, and people feel relaxed. It's a way to actually connect with another human being. The massage therapists that we have are interested in doing that and connecting with the other person and meeting them where they are. Sometimes there are musculoskeletal pains. The the referral that we had today for acupuncture, for acupressure, excuse me, is a patient who has a really significant illness, but is having some musculoskeletal pain, is bedridden, and their leg, there are parts of the person's thigh that are uncomfortable. And so applying gentle pressure to that can relieve it. And that's been our observation for some anxiety. If people are, and it's normal to feel anxiety in the situations that our patients find themselves, and they can get relief from acupressure, acupuncture, and massage. The acupressure, puncture, and massage sometimes there's music that's played along with this, and it allows people to take a break from whatever's troubling them, and these effects can last longer. Now with acupuncture, there's anxiety may be helped, and even some of the leading organizations that I cited, they recommend it in that situation. Anxiety is one, pain, and you can apply acupuncture to the painful place, but also other spots of the body that are remote from it, and that can help. And there are a number of different indications, and chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy is also one that's actively being studied with positive results from some leading medical centers with acupuncture.
What advice do you have to patients or caregivers who are listening to this and say, wow, this is great, I really want to get this as part of my overall care plan? How should they go about doing that, either at our shop or elsewhere? What's the approach that you would recommend?
Well, as I said earlier, and this is important, is to meet people where they are. So we come to whatever challenges we face with our life before that, and the foundations we've built, our habits and our practices. That's one thing. Some patients come to us and they already have a yoga practice. I will tell you, it's not common, but it has happened. Or they have a meditation practice, or they're seriously exercising. On the other hand, some people don't have any of those things. And the key, I think an important distinction is in this field is the motivation of the patient. So if you are the survivor, and if you don't need to be even conscious to receive massage or to receive acupuncture. But when you talk about doing a mind-body practice, about changing your diet, and things of that nature, exercising, it takes some motivation. So people start where you are. I think if someone's interested in this area, you might think, what do I need? What's bothering me? What's your concern? So in medicine, you'd call that the indication. Is it you're concerned about your weight? Or are you out of shape? Or are you having some pains? Are you anxious? So that's one way to approach it is, what do I want to improve the most? And then that can help narrow down how you dip your foot or your toes into this area. So that's one way to do it. And once you do that, you can there are a number of different ways. You can go to websites, and the National Cancer Institute has a couple, and we're going to post these after this interview so people will have access. There's a National Cancer Institute, also at NIH, a National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. Those leading medical centers I mentioned, MD Anderson and Sloan Kettering, they have very helpful websites. In our community in the Maryland, Virginia, DC area, there are community organizations like the Smith Center, Hope Connections, Life with Cancer, and they also allow you to have groups. And now with this virtual interaction, you can be in a group with someone in California, but these local support groups, so a cancer patient or cancer caregiver support group, where you're online with 7 or 8 people, more or less, and you can share experience. And that's really can be valuable to connect with someone who's going through or who's gone through what you're going through as a patient or survivor. So we have some of those organizations in our community. And then there's some books. For example, when I first got into this Anti-Cancer Living by Lorenzo Cohn, who's a professor at MD Anderson and the University of Texas. So those are some of the things. Also, I can meet with selected patients who are at MGUH, Georgetown, and you can do that through your physician. And if they don't know about me or our program, because it's still relatively new, Dr. Weinberg can connect them to me. And so I can help people orient to this very wide, it is wild sometimes, and beautiful area of integrative medicine, and help you to get a foothold.
And we will post a list of resources online on the Ruesch website. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Braun, and all you're doing for our patients. And thank you for those of you listening. I'm going to toss it back to my colleague, Dr. John Marshall.
Thank you very much for that. What an amazing presentation that was. I hope it met your goals. It certainly met mine. And now I'm going to shift gears to a conversation I had just a day or two ago with Dr. Alicia Brown as we do a deeper dive into GI cancer research and new therapies. Dr. Alicia Brown is an amazing human being, an artist, a scientist, an innovator and thinker, but unfortunately also a patient. And so I'll let her introduce herself and then we'll jump into a conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marshall, and welcome everybody. As Dr. Marshall mentioned, my name is Alicia Brown, and I'm a cancer patient. And in fact, June marks 1 year since my initial diagnosis, when I was diagnosed with a stage 4 colon cancer. I work with the biopharmaceutical companies, so in my daily work, I always try to put patients first. And this is the time when I became, I moved from putting patients first to becoming a patient. So it was a shock, a big transition, but also a big reminder of the importance of research and funding that needs to be set aside for this amazing research to happen.
No, it is so cool that you've immediately you joined a club you never wanted to be a member of. It was fine to be on the outside looking in, but now on both sides, looking inside and out, and immediately sort of jumped in all the way in this to try and have an impact, not only for yourself, of course, but for everyone else around you, which has been your mission in life, scientifically and career-wise too. So we're really grateful that you're joined this morning. And what we thought we would do is just sort of jump into some of the issues. And maybe if you don't mind, I get to ask you a question first. And working for a biopharmaceutical company, very successful one, could you talk a little bit about what the mission, what the tone, how you get up every morning and are excited to do what you do, just to share with our folks who are on the other side benefiting from the innovation and success that you guys have?
Yes, so I started my career with oncology research. I was actually studying tumor suppressors, looking at structural RNAs as tumor suppressors. And so oncology has always been part of my DNA, so to speak, even though I moved and worked in different areas, infectious disease and so forth. Cancer touches many people and it's all around us, and you can't really escape it. So that's what really motivates me to get up every morning. What I focus on right now is actually external collaborations, so building bridges between pharma and academia, because it does take a village to develop a drug, and we cannot, none of us can do it alone. So that's what really excites me, having that ability to work with academic investigators and leveraging each other's expertise and capabilities. And I mean, for my personal note, I was so fortunate to meet you, Dr. Marshall, and receive my treatment at MedStar. And I'm just so thankful for where I am today after having gone through a couple of surgeries and chemotherapy and radiation, and now being on maintenance therapy. My focus now is to make the best of the time I have, and I continue to work. I go to work every day and continue on the mission. I think the focus, as I see it, is turning into earlier interception, earlier intervention. So looking at early disease, which means we need good diagnostic tools to screen for any signs of early disease. So I think we're trying to work back from treating late stage disease into now treating earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's noble and good, and we could spend 20 minutes on just that concept of where to spend our focus and energy. But so many of our patients, you know, despite doing all the right things, end up with advanced disease. You're a good example. You didn't do anything wrong to, you don't have any family history. There's no real reason why you got this. And so many of our folks out there are too young to be having this problem, and then their disease turns out to be advanced. And so we do need to figure out what makes these cancers tick and how to manage them. And you know, as we talked about, we wanted to focus on a couple of big picture areas of research to make sure our audience is up to speed on things. And you know what, one of everybody's favorite topic right now is immunotherapy. And in so many ways, immunotherapy has revolutionized cancer care for so many patients. I mean, every night we're seeing advertisements during Jeopardy for new medicines for lung cancer, and we know they work for melanoma. You'd think of Jimmy Carter and metastatic melanoma, and still out there building houses. But then so many others are not benefiting from these treatments. And I thought it would be useful for us to kind of talk a little bit about, you know, these drugs and where we've come on that. And I know you guys have strong interest in this space as well.
Yes, so I actually was thinking about this. So, you know, as you know, unlike chemotherapy, which uses drugs to kill cancer cells, immunotherapy helps your immune system fight cancer. And as you mentioned, not everyone is benefiting from immunotherapy, even though we all have immune system. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some potential reasons why immunotherapy may not be the therapy of choice for everyone.
Yeah, no, it's a really important question. So I'm old. I've been doing this a while, and I've been a believer in the immune system for my entire career. And in fact, very early on, in years that began in 19, we started doing work in vaccine work to try and stimulate the immune system, because our belief at the time was that our immune systems, which are sort of the guards at the gate for foreign invaders, if you will, weren't seeing our cancers as foreign, and therefore needed to be awakened, needed to be pointed towards our cancers. And so we were doing lots of vaccine studies, and we could show that you could stimulate the immune system to recognize certain attributes of the cancer to try and go get it. And we would have some successes, I would say, but we certainly didn't have broad successes. And so this was trying to accelerate or turn on the immune system. And it really wasn't until some incredibly smart people thinking exactly the opposite. They were thinking that, wait, the immune system's fine. It's that the immune system has been blocked. The cancer has actively blocked the immune system from coming to get it. And I always think of this as sort of that Star Wars force field that's protecting the Death Star or whatever, so that if you think of Luke Skywalker out there in his X-Wing fighter, and that's the T cell, right? That's the immune system that's trying to kill the cancer. But there's this barrier, there's this force field that's preventing that. And this understanding that all you really needed to do was take out the force field, and then the T cell, Luke, could go and get the planet and kill it. And that's been an early dramatic shift in our thinking, is that the immune system wasn't broken, it was awake, and in some cancers, it was just actively being blunted or defended against by the cancer. That was one of the reasons the cancer survived, if you will. And so the medicines that we have take out the force field. And if you have an immune system and a force field and the like, all you need to do is take out the force field and the T cell can get there. So the problem has been is that not everybody's immune system is sitting out there waiting or is effective enough to go in and kill the cancer. And so we do have some markers that suggest that you do have an immune system that's there versus not. The most prominent of this is called PD-L1. That's just the force field. Is it there or not? The other is certain characteristics of the cancer, having lots of mutations in the cancer itself, something called tumor mutational burden, or a stronger one in GI cancers is called microsatellite instability. These are genetic tests we can do on patients' tumors to say, okay, you've got a lot of things that might wake up the immune system. And if you do have those things, then maybe the immune system's out there. So these are strategies to try and pick who should benefit and who should not. But even using all of these tools, it's very hard to show that patient 1 will respond and patient 2 will not. So we are doing a lot of trying these medicines in various circumstances to see if they'll work. And they're expensive. They do have some side effects, not chemo-like side effects, more like autoimmune side effects. So what we're all trying to do is figure this out. Now, in GI cancers, we just got yet another approval in a kind of esophageal cancer, where immune therapy is now approved, FDA approved in that space, in gastric cancers, in certain kinds of colon cancers, in a lot of liver cancers, in bile duct cancers, not yet pancreas, not yet all colon, but we are slowly seeing immune therapy make its way into it. Maybe you want to reflect a little bit on why you think maybe they're not working in everybody.
Well, I think we are all different, and our immune system is different. And, you know, the role of microbiome in how we respond to immunotherapy is also an active area of research. And because of our different lifestyles and dietary choices, that microbiome makeup is also different in different people. So that could also be part of the reason why we respond differently to immunotherapy.
Yeah, I think maybe our audience needs to understand what microbiome is, because we get asked it all day, every day, is can I take a probiotic and what should I be doing? And honestly, I mean, I'm pretty smart in this space, but I don't know really how to control our microbiome. And what that means is the bacteria and other creatures that live inside us that we've evolved over the millions of years to keep inside of us. I always think about if you had a sick forest, what you do is you take soil samples, right, to see what's in the soil. And that's not the tree, for goodness sakes, that's the stuff that's living around the tree. And yet we haven't figured out yet how to take a soil sample from our GI tracts to understand the health of our microbiome. And it's really the immune therapy world, as you point out, is waking us up to having to understand this part of our health and wellness and how to influence it. And we're just in our infancy of that. But I couldn't agree more that microbiome is going to be a very, very important part. And if we can control that, maybe we can also control the immune system better. I joke that it's not only the place where our immune system lives, it's also, I think, where the soul resides, but we can discuss that at another time. So we are excited about immune therapies, and but for our patients listening in, some patients they work for, some they don't, and we're trying as much as we can to figure that out. So participating in clinical trials becomes really, really important. I know your all's group does a lot of the second area we want to talk about, and that's what we call targeted therapy or precision medicine. And maybe you could talk a little bit from your science perspective as, you know, what you're thinking about when you're thinking about a targeted therapy or a target on a cancer.
Right. So I think before we even know what the targets are, I think, you know, every patient gets their tumor samples analyzed, and it's called molecular profiling. And I kind of think about it as getting to know your tumor better, kind of like speed dating. You get a biopsy sample of a tumor, you send it to the lab does the analysis, and it lets you identify changes in the way cells divide or function in your body that may contribute to development of cancer. It can also lead to identification of certain specific mutations for which there may be an existing therapy, which is called targeted therapy. So taking any particular cancer type, I wonder if you can talk about, do these therapies always work in every patient with the target gene mutation? And also, can you talk about how this type of therapy may work in different tumor types? For example, if the same gene mutation is identified in a colon and pancreatic cancer, could we use the same treatment for these two different types of cancers?
Yeah, no, it's exactly where we're going. And of course, a lot of what we've been doing at the Ruesch Center is to try and drive this shift from a one-size-fits-all, just give everybody a treatment and see if it works, to characterizing, as you say, that an individual patient's cancer and trying to figure out, are there certain vulnerabilities or sensitivities that that person has that a particular medicine may work better in. And so, as you say, first, almost every patient, particularly with more advanced cancers, should have this molecular testing. So if our audience doesn't know if their cancer's been tested, you know, it's one of those things, ask at your next visit. You really should have this done. And these are broad gene testing because there are lots and lots of abnormalities that we find, and some of them are very rare that aren't necessarily done in a particular lab or another. So having to be a good consumer is important. And as you say, knowing your own tumor. I always equate this with breast cancer patients. They all know whether they have estrogen receptors or progesterone, we call PRER, or HER2 as a target. They all know that before they even walk in to see the doctor. And yet in GI cancers, we're only just getting our patients to the place where they know their own tumor and its characteristics in a way. So the problem, of course, is that when you do these genetic testing, let's say there's a molecular marker called BRAF in colon cancer, BRAF. Well, that's only present in about 10% of colon cancers. But if you have that marker, there's now a whole set of therapies that go with that treatment. There are certain new drugs in bile duct cancers where you need to have a certain marker present for that. And that may not be that common. So you're sort of excited when you send off these tests and you hope in a way that you're going to have one of these special markers. But a lot of times we end up not finding anything that we know about right now. So, and as you asked about, so yeah, sometimes you find a marker in one cancer, and then you wonder, well, can I use the same thing in another? And we have now begun to develop drugs not specific to a particular kind of cancer, let's say pancreas cancer or colon cancer, but to a particular marker. So maybe, you know, we could talk a little bit about, you know, actionability. We call that actionability. Yeah. Could a pathway, we find a mutation, but is that one that we can target. There's a famous gene called RAS, R-A-S. It's present in lots of GI cancers. It's a mutation, it's abnormal, and we know it's part of why the cancer is the way it is, but it's been very difficult to find medicines to work against RAS. So it's, you know, there are these issues. I mean, how do you guys dealing with those kinds of targets?
So I think it's part of drug development process. Different targets go through different stages. So you may identify a target that you think may work, and then you have to validate the target if it actually is going, if you inhibit the target, is it going to produce the desired results? Sort of kind of target validation, and you do animal studies and toxicology studies, and eventually you test a molecule in a clinical trial. And actually the value I found in getting my tumor analyzed using molecular profiling is that I was able to learn about different types of mutations, and some of them there's no approved therapy. However, there are some molecules in clinical testing. So another benefit of getting your tumor tested is understanding diversity of mutations, so that you could search for open clinical trial, and perhaps you could participate in a clinical trial and see if you could benefit from that particular drug.
You know, better, faster, and all of these things loop around to each other. Precision medicine, immune therapy, improved testing, maybe control of the microbiome is a new part of this loop. Will hopefully soon, quickly, you know, really change outcomes for everybody and change how we do business in not only drug development, delivery of cancer care, but of course, the most important in outcomes for patients. So I want to give you a great shout out and thank you for sharing your time with everybody this morning. Dr. Alicia Brown has joined us to discuss our world of research and progress in GI cancer. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And to all the patients, you get through it, stay positive and focus on what you can control. Physical exercise, diet, positive mindset. We cannot control the outcome of the disease or the outcome of the treatment, but try to stay focused on what you can control.
And if I may pile on that, one way I'm living my life with this crazy world that we're having is I'm trying to find every day, back to positive outcome, something that brings me joy. And I have to tell you that for today, this talking with you has brought me joy. So thank you very much for all you're doing for others. And with that, we will bring this session to a close. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So we're now going to move on to our next topic, and this is GI cancer management tools. And I am so pleased to introduce one of our outstanding board members for the Ruesch Center, Lee Jones, who is a stage 4 colorectal cancer survivor and an amazing research advocate and quite experienced in the space of clinical research. And Dr. Marcus Noel, an associate professor at Georgetown, who also oversees our clinical research office.
So good morning, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Dr. Marcus Noel. I'm a GI medical oncologist here at MedStar Georgetown. I'm honored to be joined with Lee Jones, who is a research advocate and stage 4 colon cancer survivor, and also a Ruesch Center Advisory Board member. Today, we'd like to just share some things that we think patients with GI cancer should know about as a resource tool. Hopefully you'll find this to be helpful. I'll start, Lee, as a 15+ year cancer survivor. What do you wish you could go back and tell yourself when you were first diagnosed?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Noel. I appreciate being invited to attend this. I'm at O'Hare Airport waiting for a flight back to DC from the ASCO annual conference. So if there's noise or people coming back behind me, that's why, and that's where I am. So I actually spent 18 years since I was first diagnosed in 2004. And I've got to say, I knew absolutely nothing I've been in a hospital twice in my life when both my sons were born, and that was it. I had no family history of cancer. I had no members of my family that had cancer or died of cancer, certainly not GI cancer or colorectal cancer. So I was at a clean slate. And you also have to remember that the whole environment for patients was totally different 18 years ago. I mean, patient-centered drug development didn't really exist. Patients weren't really listened to. We were basically told, here's what we're going to give you, and that's what we got. And of course, the survival rates weren't very good back then. I remember coming back from my colonoscopy where they discovered the tumor. And of course, we checked with Dr. Google, who said 5-year survival rate from metastatic colon cancer was 7%. So that's kind of, mind shaking when you hear something like that. But my attitude was always, I don't care if no one else has survived, I can be the first one. If one other has survived, I can be the second one. So 7% didn't really faze me. And what I call a drug triplet, when I was getting 5-FU, oxaliplatin, and just been approved a drug called Avastin or bevacizumab. Really had been approved a month before I got diagnosed. So, I think the combination of those three drugs was really useful for me. The biggest thing that really concerned me is, so after my first 8 rounds of chemo, colon resection, and then 8 more rounds of chemo, I had a clean CAT scan. And so I was what's called no evidence of disease. And I thought I was cured, because nobody told me that chemo doesn't cure colon cancer. And so I was merrily going along my way, getting CAT scans every 3 months, still no evidence of disease. And a year later, it had come back into my liver. So I think that was more shocking than it would have been if I had known to expect it. I mean, really, it was expected. I mean, many fewer than 10% of people actually get cured from the chemo. So that was kind of the biggest thing that surprised me. But I mean, those are things that I think are pretty easy to tell a patient about, things to expect. And I know now with comes where they actually can study in clinical trials what those side effects, not only clinical side effects, but how it is perceived by and affects the patient individually. That information is really important for patients to know, because I think we can withstand a lot of things as long as we know what to expect. And it's the unexpected that makes us wonder, well, what's going on now? So I think those are the major things that I was thinking of that I wish I knew about. And also kind of that people do survive this now. Your life is stopped. I went and got a will signed, make sure I had life insurance. And those sorts of things are important to do to make sure that your family is taken care of, no matter what the outcome is. So just recognize that nobody really knows for sure, that a lot of what doctors will tell us is based on statistics. And even though there might be a 7% chance of 5-year survival, nothing says you're not going to be one of those. So try not to listen to that stuff. Just be willing to take as much as you can, because the drugs they're giving you are the best drugs that they have available to help with your disease. And even if it can't be cured, extending your life opens the opportunity for a cure to be identified over time. I mean, who would have thought 18 years ago that immunotherapy drugs would actually be saving cancer patients' lives? And there are cancers now that are very curable, that never used to be. So, drug development is coming along very well. People are surviving longer. The longer you can survive, the better the chance that you might find a cure.
Thank you, Lee. I often hear patients, when they're first diagnosed, they haven't been sick for ever in their life, and so then they're thrown into the medical system with a difficult diagnosis, and you're kind of, not sure where to go, especially with a advanced cancer diagnosis. And then with cancer, as you mentioned, the chemotherapy drugs can have many side effects, and we always don't do a great job as physicians of warning of the potential adverse events, and it can be very troubling to experience these and not know exactly what's happening. And then the stats, they're stats, but they don't apply. Every patient is different, and so if you do hear stats from your physician, you have to just understand that doesn't mean that's going to happen to you, and so you always want to remain hopeful and optimistic that you are going to do well and have a good outcome. And the financial piece, yes, we always want to, that's why we want to loop in social work and others to help with that avenue. But the financial toxicity of cancer and the burden that it places on you as an individual patient is quite big and large. So I think you brought up many good points, Lee. You brought up clinical trials. What do you think patients should know about clinical trials when they're diagnosed, or even after they've had cancer for a time? What would you want them to know about clinical trials?
Well, there are a couple things. There are basically three basic phases of trials. So when you hear about a clinical trial, they're not all created the same. The very first phase of the trials, all they're trying to do is look at what the dosage might be that patients can tolerate. It's called the maximum tolerable dose. And then that dose is used in the so-called phase 2 trials, where they're trying to see whether the drug has an effect on the cancer type. And those are basically generally smaller trials. And what you really probably mostly get involved in are the phase 3 trials, which are large trials. They're trying this drug on a larger number of people with various characteristics and backgrounds. So obviously, the earlier the phase is, the more unknowns there are. So they're also called the first in man trial, where the drug's never been tried in anybody, but they do years and years of laboratory work, animal work before it ever gets to people. A lot of patients are concerned and maybe afraid of the so-called placebo. I don't want to end up getting nothing because I know I need something. Well, in cancer clinical trials, placebos are not used at all, except when maybe the standard of care is nothing, like after someone's gone through chemo and surgery. Whether there's chemo after that surgery or not, sometimes there's no benefit to it. So the standard of care is nothing. So someone might be trying a clinical trial of something versus that nothing, and then those people getting nothing would get a placebo, but that's just what you would get if you weren't on a clinical trial. So I think for a lot of people, especially people that have not found an effective treatment up until then, a clinical trial may be their last hope of getting some sort of a positive effect, either reduced symptoms, longer life, or as we saw with some of those immunotherapy drugs, there were amazing results, and people in clinical trials were getting cured, which is not the expectation that people should have, but it's a possibility. So, you have to compare it with what you'd be getting otherwise. And generally in those trials, one group would get the standard treatment and the other one would get something different, generally standard treatment plus something else. But you also need to remember that there's a group called the Institutional Review Board that every institution that does clinical trials has to have. And that IRB, as it's called, reviews all the clinical trials and makes sure that the trials are safe for people. So I actually serve on an IRB at Georgetown, oncology IRB at Georgetown. So every clinical trial coming through Georgetown, and I've seen some of Dr. Noel's clinical trial applications coming through, we review them. Now, most of the IRB is scientists and doctors, but there have to be unaffiliated non-scientists on the IRB And in my case, I'm actually a patient on the IRB. So I'm even more interested in protecting any patients that are going to be going on those trials. Not a guarantee it's going to be effective, but the main things I look for is that potential harm is reduced and that there is full disclosure of everything you may deal with so that you can see what the risks might be and you can make a determination as to whether you're willing to go through that or not. They're not risk-free by any means. In some cases, they know pretty well what the side effects are going to be. Other cases, they don't. But I think as long as they tell you what they might be.
Thank you. Yes, it's every trial is not the same, and I think often patients may be it can be confusing about the phase of the trial and the fact that you know, you have some trials where you're getting placebo, but in oncology, many where you're not getting a placebo. So just talk with your doctor about the clinical trial and be confident your physician is recommending, if they're recommending a trial, it's because they're recommending so it's in your best interest, not that they want to experiment or use you as a pincushion, but they think that the trial may eventually provide benefit for you, or it could be a situation where your cancer is more advanced and there really are little to no options that are standard that they can use. And so the trial is, for lack of a better term, the last option. But certainly trials are really important, and we encourage patients to consider them when they are eligible.
Another thing too is every drug that's available has been going through a clinical trial. So that's how progress happens.
Yep, exactly. Lee, how can people connect with patient advocacy organizations? You are yourself, remain a strong patient advocate, but what tools, resources out there in the community? I know that there's some big ones like GI Cancers Alliance and Fight CRC, but how can people get information in the community, Lee?
Well, there is certainly, as compared when I was diagnosed with my treatment, there is an overabundance of information. So the most important thing is trying to find credible information. And there's a lot of information through social media that is not necessarily reliable and you really shouldn't pay attention to. But there are those advocacy organizations that make a real effort to provide real information that can make a difference for you. As Dr. Noel mentioned, Fight Colorectal Cancer is one of those GI Cancer Alliance for those that have many other GI cancers, not just colorectal. There's Colorectal Cancer Alliance, that can be confusing, two alliances. And they can also provide a connection with patients and survivors. So for a while, I was a buddy with the Alliance. So if people had questions, they could actually talk to someone like me who had been through perhaps what they're going through now, who can help guide them or give them some more information about it. There are also organizations like Hope Connections that provide what we call complementary treatment. So, when you're going through your treatment, you could have pain, you certainly are going to have anxiety, and they provide a number of services that really aren't provided through cancer centers like Georgetown Lombardi. Things that I had done, Reiki is one, meditation, Tai Chi, acupuncture. So those are things, and I don't know whether any of those really helped me get through my treatment or cured me, but they're certainly nice to have, and they're all provided free of charge. And I highly recommend you searching out what they have and finding something that is enjoyable for you and that helps you get through your treatment. Because getting through your treatment is the most important thing, and being able to get through it at kind of the highest dose that you can tolerate, because that's what's going to be killing the cancer cells. Unfortunately, with chemotherapy, a lot of the other cells are killed as well, but now they have targeted therapies depending on your mutation that's causing your particular cancer, that will not be chemotherapy, don't have the same effects that chemotherapy has. So don't worry and think, oh my God, I've heard so many bad things about chemotherapy, I can't do this. Well, there are alternatives. So it's really not something to be concerned about, but it is worth talking to your doctor about, how you're able to tolerate whatever your treatment is, because there can be alternatives.
Thank you, Lee. And I'll just add another example is PanCan, the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, which is a great organization involved with pancreas cancer research, but also advocacy group for patients. So I think we're out of time, but really I'm honored to do this panel with Lee this morning / afternoon. And thank you for bearing with us through our technical issues as we're all busy with returning from ASCO that we were all at this weekend. Really exciting meeting. Thank you once again.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Noel. I just add all my treatments at Georgetown, my chemo and my surgery. So you're at a good place.
That was really a fascinating discussion, and we very much appreciate our speakers for giving us their time and their insights. But we'll now move to our final presentation for the morning, and this is supporting the caregiver. Martha Raymond and Jasmine Greenamyer are going to do a deep dive into the role of the caregiver and how best to support them.
Good morning. My name is Martha Raymond. I'm the founder of the Raymond Foundation and executive director of the GI Cancers Alliance. And it's our pleasure to be here today with my friend and colleague, Jasmine Greenamyer, for the GI Patient Summit, hosted by our friends from the Ruesch Center and Hope Connections for Cancer Support. Jasmine and I are here today to chat a little bit about the important role of our cancer caregivers and to talk about the partnerships that are formed and are forming that help our caregivers in the important work that they do. So Jasmine, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Martha. I'm very happy to be here and to have this conversation. So I'm very fortunate. I am the Vice President and Head of Global Strategic Partnerships at EMD Serono. And EMD Serono is a healthcare company, a biotech company located just outside Boston, Massachusetts. And I oversee our Embracing Carers initiative. It's a global initiative where we get to work with the leading advocacy organizations as it relates to family caregiving. I also oversee our Healthy Women, Healthy Economies initiative. And there's obviously synergy, right, as we think about family caregiving and the disproportionate role that women often have in caregiving.
Great to be with you today, Jasmine, and for all of my advocacy colleagues. Many of us know Jasmine from her years of work in the advocacy space and as a mentor to myself and many of us in the community. So it's just great to be here today with you. I guess I'd like to start just on a personal note, and then Jasmine, I definitely would like to turn it over to you so you could share more about the important work, Embracing Carers and the caregiver index that you've worked on during COVID, which I know is so important. For me, caregiving dates back many, many years. Both my parents passed from colon cancer when I was young. So I became a very young caregiver for them. And then most recently, my sister passed from colon cancer last year. And as Jasmine and I will discuss, especially with COVID, trying to be a caregiver at any time is not easy, but especially during COVID, when you can't be with your loved one so often is so difficult. And so I think this is a very timely conversation, and look forward to learning more from all of you, and especially from Jasmine as we have our conversation. So Jasmine, I guess, could you give us an overview of Embracing Carers? I know it's such an important initiative and really globally has received so much attention. And, are there ways that all of us can not only learn from the materials, but become involved as well?
No, it's a good question, Martha. So we as a company initiated Embracing Carers in 2017, and it was feedback directly from patient advocacy organizations because they alluded to the fact that they saw the importance of family caregivers, right? a patient in survival will be the first to tell you how meaningful the cancer journey is and how helpful it is to have a family caregiver right there by your side from the beginning or at any interval throughout the journey, right? So we got that direct feedback. But as a healthcare company, we saw two items. One, family caregivers obviously can help with the adherence to treatment or the access to treatment, the research to treatment, the shared decision-making around treatment or transportation to clinical trials, or comprehending, understanding what you just heard as you're getting this initial news or as you're having to navigate all the layers related to cancer treatment, right? So there's the role with the healthcare system. But the other thing that I think is really neat about our company's approach is looking at the distress that family caregivers often face emotionally, physically, or financially as they go on this journey with their loved one, right? And so what we wanted to lean into is better understanding and bolstering support for family caregivers. And you alluded to this in your opening remarks that as the pandemic was starting to unfold, we as a team got together and thought about how is this affecting family caregivers who are having to navigate the pandemic? And we saw it as an opportunity to do a global survey to hear directly from family caregivers about how they were being impacted. And let me tell you, that was one of the top findings. We were surprised to see it corroborated as much as it was that cancer caregivers felt more emotional distress than any other type of caregiver, including Alzheimer's and dementia, which I was like, I wasn't expecting it to that degree. We also saw that cancer caregivers felt emotionally isolated more so than others. And we had an overwhelming percent, 94% indicate, I wish there was more accessible mental health support. And whether that's talking to someone who's like me or just able to say, I need to vent in a place and be able to, navigate through this confusing information or figure out how to get, PPE or, what are just resources for me as I'm dealing with my own anxiety that I'm not trying to not put on my loved one or patient, right? So that was some of the key findings, and I'm willing to talk a little bit more, but that's why just as a company, we really wanted to lean in to better understand how we could support family caregivers. And part of why I feel so lucky to have this conversation with you, partners like you, is we know you're the experts on the field, right? I mean, it's only as good as the partnerships that we have.
And I think that's so important too, is the whole aspect of all of us working together, whether it's industry, advocates, our support centers, especially that help not only the patient, but the caregiver. But I do think it's conversations like this that can really help caregivers feel like they're not out there alone and that others understand what they're going through. And I think especially with the pandemic, and those findings are so interesting, Jasmine, from the index study, that having just gone through this, I think too, during the pandemic, I would agree that adding that extra layer of, can I go to the hospital? Can I go, when hospice was called in, all of those things, I think it just added that extra layer on top of everything else where you're trying to be that rock for the person. And hopefully we've all learned, from that experience.
Yeah. And Martha, first I was remiss in not acknowledging your loss, right? So I'm sorry for you and your family. And I've just always been deeply respectful of the work that you've done, but adding that, that layer of personal connection to this has got to be immense. I'd be curious, with your years of experience in the field, how do you think that healthcare professionals can better involve family carers right there at the point of, some of those crucial appointments?
I think we all realize that the caregiver is that extra set of ears in the room, or the individual that can say, I'm on top of these appointments, or if it's oral, chemotherapy at home, I'm going to make sure that, my loved one adheres, to the treatment plan. So I do think that caregivers really have, like I said before, kind of come into the forefront and are part of that crucial team now. And I think that's a long time coming, but I do think it's great that in partnership, we've all kind of made that happen. Years ago, like I said, 35 years ago, when I was much younger and a caregiver, for my mom, I was in college. Back then caregivers weren't, you weren't even recognized really, unless you really spoke up. And so now I think that it's really been a shift, and it's a great thing to see, I think, because I think if we're putting our patients first, the patients feel much more at ease, realizing that they have somebody right there with them that understands and that will be their voice if they can't or are not able to speak up at the time. So I really think it is collaboration and partnership, and that will continue to move things forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I want to pull the thread on one part of what you alluded to, because another interesting finding for us was seeing there's somewhere a disconnect where overwhelmingly family caregivers were saying they didn't feel like healthcare providers were acknowledging them. And that was a bit of a surprise, because I similar to yourself, thought we've done so much as a community, right, to be advocating on this. So either caregivers aren't feeling that, or, I'd be curious where that tension is. And we're trying to currently do some various partnerships to better understand how healthcare providers can be more impactful or have the message resonate where they're acknowledging family caregivers. But the thing that really struck me in that is, again, pulling the thread that we saw in communities of color, that it was even more likely that they would say that they didn't feel acknowledged in these healthcare meetings and appointments, and that they were asking for more, not just emotional support, but financial support, just having resources that are specifically given to family caregivers. And so I thought that was an important finding. And one area that we're really leaning into as well is, is there mental health support, or referrals that can be given to family caregivers, when they're in these appointments. And I know there's quite a burden put on healthcare providers and the system at large, but just even some type of acknowledgement, like, we see you, we value you. Is there anything that you need in this? And similar to the work, Martha, that you were such a vanguard on patient navigation, is there also caregiver navigation that can be happening, to talk about the various individual or family or community resources that can be helpful.
So many important points, Jasmine, that you brought up. And I think one thing I would add, and especially to the work and the findings, that caregivers maybe feel that they're not heard, maybe from healthcare professionals. And I do think that kind of outlines the more work we have to do. So important, because I think just like we try to help our patients learn the skills so that they can be part of the team and, communicate with healthcare professionals, maybe this is an opportunity for us to, bring our caregivers together and say, here are some tools that will help you be part of that team and, kind of know what questions to ask and when to, I think so many times all of us, we're a little hesitant to speak up sometimes. And I think that that's part of that whole educational process and empowerment, is to be able to say, there's no dumb question. If you feel it's important and the patient feels it's important. So I think that does give us that opportunity. And the other thing I would say too, as, looking at, sometimes the inequalities in healthcare for persons of, color, I agree. I think it's not only with the patients that feel that sometimes they're not listened to, but definitely with the caregivers. And so I think there's a lot of work that I know so many of us are trying to do and wanting to make a difference in many different communities that, are just not, unfortunately, the health equity is just not there at this time.
I agree. And that's right. To your point on partnerships and convening roles, this is where I acknowledging the Ruesch Center and its support of the GI Cancer Alliance, that's a very important resource because it's a very interesting cross-section of stakeholders that are at the table there. And, I think it's a combination of that personal individual advocacy that you alluded to. Here are some questions that may be helpful to you as you intersect with the healthcare team. But I'd also encourage the GI Cancer Alliance to advocate for system change too, right? To have referrals and supports for family caregivers, or minimally to encourage them to say, like, if check into the resources your employer might have, or be aware of different advocacy organizations that could help you. There's cancer-specific organizations, but there's also national caregiving organizations that can be very helpful for that. And I know the GI Cancer Alliance, has pulled together some of those various resources. There's also different resources that we highlight on our embracingcures.com website as well.
Again, I think that's just so important, underscores that, no one's alone out there. We understand, and that together, we can make that difference. Well, it's just been great chatting with you today, Jasmine. I know we could go on, and I hope we'll be able to continue our conversation, down the road, and who knows, maybe work on some things for our caregivers, and educational and empowerment tools together. That would be wonderful. And again, for individuals that want to learn more about Embracing Cares, what is the website?
Yep, it's embracingcures.com. Thank you for asking that. And I would also allude to, we're not just looking at the data and the findings we saw around mental health support. Later this fall, we will be launching a Help Not Hugs campaign, where family caregivers are going to be leaning into sharing some of their stories to just normalize the "you're not alone" factor, but also to be advocating for more accessible mental health resources. There are some mental health deserts in the United States and other places in the world. We see the role of employers and healthcare professionals in holding hands to better support this often invisible group that does feel isolated and as if they're the only one who may be experiencing this, or feeling guilty in experiencing this. So information about that will also be on our embracingcures.com website later this fall.
Look forward to that. And again, it's been wonderful to be with everyone today. And thank you to the Ruesch Center and Hope Connections for cancer support. Thank you.
So thank you all so much for spending your morning with us. I hope that you gained as much from this summit as I did. It has been a great event. We want to thank all of the docs that came out this morning, and presenters to help us out. And it was a great day. And Dr. Marshall, what did you think of our sessions today?
I did miss not being together. I do like the camaraderie and getting together and sharing a meal, a cup of coffee, and checking in with other people, but maybe next year. But on the other hand, many of our audience probably been in their pajamas all morning. So there are these trade-offs that you mentioned earlier. But I want to give another shout out, not only to Hope Connections as just an amazing partner, but our other sponsors, AbbVie, Taiho, Natera, and Bayer. We are so grateful for all that they do to help us put on programming such as this for all of us. Everybody have a great rest of your weekend.